Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Intermission.
Look, I'm not trying to say anything about you here. I'm just trying to say that if you've never woken up in a bus shelter without any pants before, you haven't lived. Oh, hey.
Kinsie, get off the phone.
Hey, I'm not the one who's multitasking here.
Technically, yeah, that's true. Currently with us, we've got Kinsie, as usual.
Sadly.
We have Alfonzo, who is not actually here at the moment, but is actually playing another game rather than recording with us.
I'm just sort of stalling in the bathroom at the moment, holding a carbine. Come back to me later.
Bathroom carbines, standard operating procedure in the United States, I'm led to believe.
Yeah, we've got like 3 carbines per household, really. And we also have Do, brought back with us again all the way from the Caco Awards.
Hi, I was already on my way to bed and I was just rubbing coconut oil into my skin before going to sleep, but then Term lighted the do signal because he didn't have enough people on the podcast, so here I am, ready to entertain.
Yeah, and people quit on me. It's really quite a shame.
Illuminati's a slave ship, apparently, and they've just dragged Du up from the hull.
That's just, hey, we're recording tonight. Be ready in 10. Then from there, let's jump straight into our regular occurrence news. News in the actual Doom community is kind of sparse this time.
But in the surrounding communities, things seem to be livelier than usual.
We have yet another foray into the field of indie retro-style FPSs, because that field never really can have too many entries. I'm always excited when another comes out of the woodwork. We have Arthurian Legends.
Oh shit, I saw that video and it looks amazing.
We've got just a short 1-minute teaser, and it appears to be made by a man called Keelatorian, or at least that's his YouTube title. I honestly can't tell because it's bare bones as can be, but it appears to be a sort of first-person not witch haven, where you roam around in a medieval world with knights and swords and sorcery, and you dual-wield blades of different kind.
I'm kind of torn about this one. On one hand, it's sticking really close to that whole capstone witch haven aesthetic, which is something that hasn't been explored a whole lot outside of those games. On the other hand, people who have fond memories of Capstone's games like Witch Haven typically haven't played them in a very long time, because holy hell, those games have not held up.
I think probably the thing that really stands out most to me is there's level design. There's actual level design. I mean, there's verticality, there's stairs, there's floors that go up, there's rooms that aren't blocky. It's incredible. There's...
Now, we don't know what the level flow is going to be like yet.
I don't care.
Things might look pretty, but praising things just off their prettiness is how Torm got involved in things.
I don't care. Just the fact that there is rooms and level design that aren't just Wolfenstein 90-degree room corridor, I am happy. To
me it has like sort of a Realms of Haunting vibe, more than Witch Haven. Like it's the spooky mansion feel I get from it, and I'm not sure I'm still not sold on it because it looks like the gameplay looks, a multiplayer RPG game. Like it looks clunky, so I will wait till we see more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because retro style FPSs by indie teams they've been kind of a mixed bag lately. Like, there's the Wolfenstein clone stuff that Term mentioned, that's been pretty iffy. Then there's been Strafe, which has gotten a lot of strong reactions from the community at large, but I think my personal opinion, I'll just leave and say that it did not give me herpes.
I'm really looking forward to this sort of first-person dual-wielding stab 'em up with level design. I mean, we've only got 1 minute, so who knows? It may turn into total arse down the line. But first impressions to me, pretty good. I like the openness of the levels. I like that you can actually move in a couple directions. I like that you can manipulate weapons individually in each hand. One thing that I'm not really 100% on is how all of the enemies, they look like mom and dad and brother and sister decided to put on aprons and a pot for a helmet. And then they combine that with incredibly high resolution fire. It's really quite jarring.
Yeah, I think the LARPing enemies are basically what gives it the real Witch Haven-y vibe, for better or worse. Because Capstone sure did love dressing people up and putting them in front of a green screen.
Hey, it worked for Rise of the Triad.
Rise of the Triad was made by competent people.
Well, not the original one.
I guess we'll just have to agree to disagree on this one.
Right.
Like, I'm wondering what the dual-wielding system will be like. Is it like just 2 fire buttons, or is there more control to that? Because I still have flashbacks to a game called Death by the Sword, I think it was called, back in the 90s.
Die by the Sword, yeah, with the mask.
Die by the Sword, right. That was awful. The clunkiest controls I can ever think of.
Yeah, it was super wacky and weird, and the developer of that went on to become part of the Call of Duty machine.
So here's my attempt to sort of shoulder my way into this discussion on something that I have absolutely no knowledge. But I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on the way that sort of modern developers tend to want to create a more sort of retro FPS experience and how they market it, and the things they get right and wrong in that respect. Because Strafe was brought up there. That's the only one of which I have some knowledge. So, sort of, who are they marketing towards, and what do they fail in doing when they're advertising there's something as a retro FPS?
I feel that trying to market a retro FPS to the people that still play retro FPSs today is something of a losing game, because the people that want more retro FPS stuff are typically still active in retro FPS communities.
Right. And they can still get it for those respective games.
And they're still getting their hit on a regular basis through custom mods and that. Like, I've had this actually explained to me by a guy who worked on level design for Call of Duty games. People were going on him like, why aren't you guys making things more Quakey level design-wise? Why aren't things more open? And he's like, look, dude, you guys are already getting your fix. And it's a real pity, I suppose, because the only way those level designers on the modern AAA FPSs can really cut loose with this open level design is like in multiplayer modes.
One thing is that a lot of people, they tend to have a sort of misconception as to what a retro FPS actually is. If Wolfenstein The New Order and Doom 2016 have demonstrated anything, it's that people have no clue what a retro FPS actually was and played.
It's sort of like trying to describe a wumpus.
What's a wumpus?
It's a thing you have to hunt.
The thing with Strafe is a little bit of an interesting beast, because I am told, and I have no clue or method of verifying this, is that the marketing team and the developing team were on 2 entirely separate notes, and that the Strafe developers, they wanted to make a sort of general synthwave roguelike sort of thing, but the marketers, they took a look at this and went, oh, it's an old school shooter, and ran that into the ground completely, which kind of worked against the game when it came out, because it really does not play anything like in the 80s.
Right.
I want to ask, because, you know, the big thing that was hyped about Strafe was the procedural generation, right?
Yes.
But I've heard that it's actually not all that. By the way, I avoided the game after it got like iffy reviews or everything, so I don't know anything about it apart from just watching stuff about it. So how much of the content is actually generated?
From what I've seen and noticed, I haven't gotten past the first world myself. Apparently the environments actually get better after the first world. It's like the worst part of the game. But what I've noticed is that the first room and the last room of a level are always the same, and it sort of strings together rooms in a pre-made rooms in a procedurally generated fashion to link them together, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So level 1 always starts with one specific room and the elevator is always in a specific room, but the route between them always changes.
And it's just the first room and the last room, not like a checkpoints or something.
Yeah, sort of, and like every couple of levels, the end area also has like a shop or something.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like NetHack or whatever, where it's just stringing rectangles together. It's like prefab rooms.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to what Term said, the only real behind-the-scenes look thing I have to contribute about Strafe is that I know some of the creative people behind it had a past history doing like music videos and stuff. So that would explain why the trailers and stuff had such high production values, that because they had the most experience in stretching their dollar on those.
Didn't they use like a Westwood Studios style 90s real live action footage?
Yeah, like one of the trailers, they released a behind the scenes and it was like all a single take on a green screen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the thing that it really comes down to is that I think the developers of Strafe are really good at like the video and marketing side, but not so experienced at the actual developing of the game side.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not the worst game I played in the last year or whatever. It just needs some extra polish and adjustment, I reckon.
It's not the worst game we've played, but that's not really high praise in a realm that's getting regularly good stuff.
The most damning thing about it simply is that it's just not what people wanted. Although, if you look at the large number of Doom mods that add in reloading and fall damage, you would be forgiven for thinking otherwise.
Do we know how many developers were actually on the team? I mean, this... because if you think about all the legitimate retro FPSs, they were all, 20-something dudes with long hair who were obsessed with metal. I'm thinking specifically of Doom too much, I guess. In fact, I don't know anything about the other developing studios and how they might compare, but I imagine they were all very small teams. And that's just one sort of deliberately placed stumbling block that deliberately contributes to something not quite hitting the mark in that respect. They have too many conflicting creative inputs from different people. Mm-hmm. Like you were talking about Strafe having that problem as well. So, and it strikes me that a lot of so-called indie companies like this trying to get that FPS, retro FPS vibe going fail because of that.
I think it's easier to make stuff with a smaller team nowadays than it was back in the 90s. The tools are better.
Yeah,
tools are much better.
It's really just a matter of what they took away from the genre and how they applied it.
Right.
No one ever sets out to make a bad game. They just sort of happen. It's just interesting to see how things fall out in the end.
Next up, speaking of more modern stuff that indicates that people don't entirely know what they want out of retro FPSs, we have the release of D4D Death Foretold. The authors of Doom 4 Doom, Major Cook and DD Thanatos, they didn't entirely agree on the directions the mod was going in, and so both of them split ways to handle the project as they see fit. Doom 4 Doom is the sort of features part of the project, and got like the heftiest code base with the most stuff in it. Death Foretold is a little more portable, with newer sprites, the ability to run on a lot more source ports. It's got multiplayer because it can run on Zandronum now, and it can be run on phones somehow.
Yeah, D-Touch is like a version of an old GZ Doom for smartphones.
I have never checked out GZ Touch. I have no clue how it works, but there's been a couple videos of it running on D-Touch, so I assume it works?
There are a lot of people in Doom World, at least, that are obsessed with the idea of like getting Jaguar Doom up to scratch or something and getting things work on D-Touch. But I always assumed that was just the coder's wet dream, and it was just, plugging the gaps, a sort of accomplishment like that, but that no one otherwise wanted Jaguar Doom and things like that. So that's my relevance to this conversation as far as I can go, I'm afraid.
At least as far as bringing stuff to a portable device, it's a lot more competent than those older, hey, let's bring all these old games to PSP communities where they just sort of make terrible TCs for like PSP Quake.
I mean, I guess I can see the appeal, because being able to play these games on the go is really, really cool. I mean, we like Doom. We probably want to be able to play it in more places, right?
I guess so. I mean, at least someone like Gustavo is going to have a whale of a time doing his editing on his iPad Touch or whatever. That's just a shout-out joke for all the Doom World folks. The rest of you can just, yeah, sit tight.
The interesting thing about D4T in comparison to its predecessor is that it's very fast and cut down. Where D4D has a lot of like upgrading using points or whatever, in D4T upgrades just sort of fall off of enemies and occasionally they spawn near keys. Mm-hmm. And also enemies seem to hit a lot harder, which I guess is keeping the Doom 4 feel. Like imps can wax you in like 4 hits.
Yeah, it's generally more difficult, and you don't really have the fancy pick-your-own upgrade system in order to accommodate all of the challenges at once. So it's a different ride. Even if you've loved Doom 4 Doom and are familiar with it in and out, D4T, it's definitely worth a run, even if only to see which one you prefer.
I tell you to give multiplayer a shot with it, but let's be honest. Anyone who's using Zandronum is still playing like complex Doom with colourful hell and some brutal Doom variant. So there's really not much of a point.
Or WhoDunIt. Ugh.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Still busy stabbing people.
Next up, we have Shadow Warrior Classic on Steam. The developers have released probably the holy grail of any nerddom: older builds. The recent update for Shadow Warrior Classic has included alpha builds, beta builds, and a whole treasure trove of information within. This is cool.
Like, the game came out in 1997, right? The oldest build they released dates back to 1994.
Yeah.
Shadow Warrior basically wrote the book on development hell that Duke Nukem Forever would go on to quote profusely. And it's really interesting to see how it evolved from like basically an Apogee game in 3D with pixel art graphics everywhere, all the way through to basically Mickey Rooney's character from Breakfast at Tiffany's fighting off poorly CG monsters.
This is cool. This is like really, really cool. It is awesome to just take a look at the sprites and the newer builds, and then you go back to the older builds, and you can see their sort of grosser, more raw incarnations. Like the Karate Chop sprite, it has a dude's face on the very side where they didn't even cut out the face just yet. And it is really interesting to see where all of these resources came from and just how they cleaned them up over time. It's really awesome to just see the game change from like anime Rise of the Triad to anime Duke Nukem 3D, and now we've got the new Shadow Warrior 2, which is kind of like an anime Borderlands.
And I think they're still finding prototypes. They dug one up yesterday and they sent it off to possibly get included in an update.
Nice.
So who's releasing this actually?
It's been like a bunch of the eDuke32 people have been digging these up from 3D Realm's older hard drives and backup drives and stuff, but they're being officially released in by Devolver Digital.
Oh right, yeah, because I'm seeing that on GOG.
Because there's a free version of Shadow Warrior on Steam. It's just the original game loaded into DOSBox. It was originally part of a Facebook promo, but they made it free because someone stole all the promo keys. And they're basically loading the prototypes into that.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a mess because there's a lot of games on Steam with Shadow Warrior in the title. So I need to find the one called Shadow Warrior Classic with 1997 in parentheses afterwards.
Just in case you've forgotten which one is the classic one.
Yeah. Video games, man.
Speaking of video games, a channel called Digital Foundry released a retrospective of Quake 2 and how it changed the FPS genre. It takes a look at the tech behind it, the numerous different ports, and how the different developers managed to get its power just crammed onto the weaker at the time consoles. It's a little questionable on some things, but it's still a really, really interesting video to go through nonetheless. It's really cool to just see this snapshot of technology and how different developers, different consoles, they took this thing that was Quake 2, and they all handled it in slightly different ways.
Yeah, Digital Foundry is a site that is basically entirely about game tech, like tech. They have tools like to analyze frame rates and put the same inputs into different consoles to compare different versions. They are just all about comparing different versions of games, looking at how games perform, just the absolute numbers game stuff for the people who obsess about that sort of thing to fuel console war arguments on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And DF Retro is them basically applying those tools and knowledge to old games. And they know their stuff when it comes to the technology side of things.
Mm-hmm.
And Quake 2 is a really interesting thing because, again, it's something that couldn't really work on the consoles at the time due to the engines. So the different solutions people came across to bring the game across were really interesting. Like Quake 2 64 actually uses a modified version of the Quake 1 64 engine.
Mm-hmm.
And the PlayStation version is like an entirely new engine built just for that console and that game. Sort of like with the Quake Saturn stuff.
One thing I found really, really interesting is that Quake 2 was probably one of the first 3D games to use animation interpolation for 3D models, which really is something we take a lot for granted now. Like, even a lot of Quake 1 source ports, it automatically implements a sort of animation interpolation, and even GDXBlood, it's got monster movement interpolation and interpolated movement for offsets, and
but not model interpolation for some reason.
Mm-hmm. And they got rid of that on the Nintendo 64 port, and it's like an entirely different game.
Yeah, because it's still based on Quake 1.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would also say that, yeah, you say actually that, yeah, Quake 2 brought a lot to the table, like a whole slew of new technologies, but it was the first ID game that truly felt like just a tech demo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even back in the 90s, I felt the game was actually pretty boring.
Wow.
And
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. The term's going to call him out on that and not the fact that he called id Software ID.
Okay, id. But that's everything I'm going to retract, and I will still call the game pretty fucking boring.
Quake 2 was an interesting point in history because it was the first game id made without Romero. And as much as Romero's past since then has been checkered, he had a good mind for design, and it was interesting to see id sort of try and figure out how to do stuff without him hovering around giving suggestions.
Well, Quake 2 is the Hexen of id games.
Whoa!
No, let's not go crazy here.
Dude.
Like,
It's you press switches and then you backtrack through maps again, and you're just trying to find what you did.
I get what you're trying to go for here, but I stringently disagree. So.
Okay, wow.
And it's really hard to take monsters down. They're damage sponges. They really are.
Which is really strange because they come apart really easily when you just blast them enough times. I mean, even normal bullet guns like the double-barreled shotgun, that can just jib people hardcore.
And I don't think there's anything in Quake 2 that is quite on the level of those fucking centaurs.
Yeah, I mean, I love Hexen, but fuck those centaurs. Fuck them. Fuck them.
I will say that I really enjoy watching Quake 2 deathmatch videos, because those guys are insane. They can actually rocket jump with that slow rocket launcher. That's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But
I've been watching. I watched a bunch of Quake 2 speedrunning for a while. It's a weird game. There's a lot of weird sort of tricks you have to do. I don't have anything else to contribute. I'm sorry.
One of the biggest selling points about Quake 2 at the time was the sort of graphical tech behind it. It was strong. It was powerful. It was. It issued in a new era. But ironically enough, that's the exact thing that sticks out more and more now as time goes on, because by God, is it an ugly game now.
Yeah, it hasn't aged quite as well as some of its precursors.
Mm-hmm.
Like those polygonal explosions, man.
The early era of 3D was just not kind. I mean, sprites, they kind of last forever. You can go higher and higher resolution, but even low resolution sprites will look good.
Unless they're like those stick figure-y ones.
Fuck off. Low poly models look bad. There's no two ways about it. Low poly models look bad. And it's really kind of funny, like going back to older 3D games and looking at the sexy characters back then, like the Dead or Alive models. They're copious amounts of curves, or rather, should I say, angles.
I was watching someone play Dead or Alive on the Saturn recently. You can really tell where the poly count went.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but the only reason I kept playing Tomb Raider when I was younger was actually for strangling and killing all the animals. Nothing to do with Lara Croft.
Yeah.
Nothing quite like bringing about a few extinctions.
And that's one thing, I think games like Doom will probably have a much easier time staying in the sort of public eye compared to games like Quake and Quake 2, because the sprites look good. It's easier to enhance sprites. It's not easy to enhance models. I mean, we've seen all of the high-resolution texture projects, and those look awful. They look really awful.
The world of Doom and the sprites that inhabit it kind of rely on either the environment that they sit in or the sprites themselves not actually getting better than they are. They are in peak condition, basically, as evidenced by, whenever someone tries to make high-resolution textures and then puts them into the game, and then the sprites alongside them will always look bad. But the Quake material, Quake 2, is sitting in that sort of uncanny valley, but right in the trough of it, so that there's all that room for improvement. But it's at base value, it's quite uncomfortable to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
sprites can't really
I would actually say that it depends on the art direction, because when you look at System Shock 2 or Unreal, they came later than Quake 2, and System Shock 2 arguably is the ugliest model game ever, probably.
Yeah, Looking Glass were just really, really bad at the art side of things.
But somehow the art direction makes you ignore that. Like you apart from the modern remodeling efforts or whatever, you can completely ignore that. You can it's just you take out the brain and you just take it in because the environment is so appealing. But that's what I was saying, that Quake 2 is a tech demo. You can't possibly get engorged by just the environment and ignore that it's actually dated, which you can completely ignore in something like Unreal, because God, that game's sexy.
A lot of that is because of the mapping. I mean, it used its mapping in order to sort of eke out a unique aesthetic. I mean, you can turn off the textures entirely in Unreal, and the maps will still look fantastic.
And I mean, the defining moment of 90s mapping was walking out of the ship in Unreal and just hearing the music and watching the beauty out there. That was the best thing in the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that initial reveal of the Falls level is, it hasn't aged quite as well because it's a fairly empty area, but it's very large. So
I have wet dreams about that level.
Change your sheets.
You have to wait until we were deep into the podcast.
Speaking of weird and slightly creepy, GDXBlood came into beta recently.
We covered this last time as something that might come out soon, and lo and behold, it has indeed come out soon. It's not actually that accurate to Blood, but I mean, it's the source port. Folks can finally play it on something other than DOSBox, or one of those terribly underdone TCs for other engines like ZBlood.
I think it's an important baby step.
Is it?
Did he release the source code? I forget if he has or has not.
Because he did not. He did not do that.
I don't think he has, but...
he won't. He said he won't.
Oh.
Well, it's still not as big a problem as it used to be, because, I'm completely illiterate about this kind of stuff, but as I understand it, Java code is easier to decompile and reverse engineer than like native code. So in the worst case scenario, someone can figure out how it works and use it as a base to rebuild somewhere else.
It's basically not compiled but interpreted in a virtual machine.
Yeah, so it's sort of like with Minecraft modding, which is all based on like decompiling and reverse engineering the Java code of that game. A lot of people are doing that. It is a known science. So in the absolute worst case scenario where the source code for GDXBlood is never released, people can make their own source code.
We're going to have to ask the Minecrafters.
Could someone...
The thing is, I've actually... just recently, I've caught a topic in Doomworld that said there was actually another Blood source recreation in Unity.
Oh god, this fucking thing. So for those of you who are coming to this late, ModDB posted a tweet mentioning that they had seen a cool Blood remake on their website, which was being made in Unity for all the modern bells and whistles. And I believe it came out in some form recently, and it... how can I put this in a polite way? I cannot, so I won't. It was shithouse.
When have you ever bothered for the polite way?
Near a lady.
So, in the end, he who must not be named is also working on this game we might or might not be talking about.
I'm kind of interested in knowing like where the interest. I understand there would be an interest in developing these thought sports for these sort of peripheral games, but the communities that are responsible for doing it are these lone wolves, sort of, or do they operate out of larger hubs? And does it depend on those sorts of communities for these things to eventuate?
I will admit that I'm not terribly involved in the scene because I do not have fond memories of Blood, but I will say that at a cursory glance, the source port / building scene for Blood really reminds me a lot of the scene of Marathon, in which there are a lot of people that want to do their own thing and aren't exactly willing to work with other folks.
It's a interesting situation in Marathon stuff. I have a bunch of writing to do about that at some point. I got Merb to vent at me about that stuff, and he had some interesting things to say.
Blood is kind of in the similar boat, I think.
Well, probably not, because its source is probably irretrievably lost, and the rights are...
No, that's the worst part. The source code is not lost. There are people involved with that game who still have it. They just can't release it for legal reasons.
Right, yeah. Because no one knows who owns the rights, or it's a messy situation.
It's just because Atari doesn't want to sell it. I mean, well, that's not entirely true. They do, but last we checked, the figure for selling it lied somewhere within the quintillion dollars. And
because
it's like,
Atari basically drifts from bankruptcy to bankruptcy.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, we all want the source code. Nobody wants to pay that much money.
Yeah, like, every time something good happens with the Shadow Warriors series, Devolver Digital's like, alright, Blood IP time. And every time it's too expensive for them.
They keep raising the price.
Of course, it probably doesn't help that their mouthpiece for discussing this sort of thing is a fictional financier.
A Colonel Sanders guy.
Yeah. Fork Parker. When will you learn? Did you hear what they're doing for E3 this year, Devolver? They're renting out the car park across the road from E3 and hosting their own event.
Really?
Yeah, and it's gonna... I think it's like free for people who go to E3, and they're gonna be having like game demos and live bands and food trucks and such.
That is interesting.
They do weird stuff like that. It's interesting. But one last piece of news I've got here, actually. So Blade of Agony Chapter 2 put out a pretty big trailer and famously announcing, like, really pushing their big release date that they had in mind. They have cancelled that release date and have gone back to the drawing board to change some stuff, because as it turns out, the game ran like utter shit.
Oh, well, I mean, if it's not due to promotional pictures being manufactured ahead of the release date, then there's not going to be any dramas about it on Doom World. I can guarantee that much.
Like,
no big numbers, no issue.
A staple of Tormentor 667 style of mapping is, and always has been, cock-choking amounts of detail in maps. This has given rise to the community meme of needs more detail, and was even given a sort of questionable mark of fame when Tormentor's own guide to detail was given the Worst WAD award in the CAC Awards.
So what happened was that level 5 of the new episode that the release focuses on was running like a dog with no legs. Just like 5 FPS, 10 FPS, or whatever. So I think it was Nash who kicked this off. He went to the engine developers, Graf and Rachel and that, and asked them, like, what's going on? How can this be improved and that? And they basically took one look at it and responded like, you have 7,000 active things in your map! And those were also spawning things, like snow generators and that. So basically the map was just spewing out, it had so much stuff in it that they've had to sort of cut the level in half and change a bunch of other stuff to try and get the frame rate up. And it really is just the epitome of Torm being Torm, isn't it? It's Tormed so hard the engine itself could not hack it.
Why not just wait 5 years for better hardware?
Last I checked, official word from Graf is that it was running 15,000 actors and thing processes at once. And, I mean...
So he saw those Russian maps with like 20,000 graph things, and he said, I can do better.
Hold my beer.
Torm's official response to this has been, sure, we could have said if it runs too slow, deactivate the effects or buy new machines, but this is not our philosophy. We want to reach as many persons as possible who are interested in this project and try to give everyone the same experience when playing without reducing settings just to make it run with a few FPS faster. And I mean, that's pretty admirable. I mean...
that's corporate talk, though. That's like...
It's one of those things where, like, I get it. He's responded to it fairly well, but, like, getting into this situation in the first place, to this degree, in the Doom engine... Like, I was watching Icarus Lives last night. He was streaming knee-deep in Zandronum. And it's like, the methods have sort of changed. Like, he sort of changed away from sector detail to actor detail. But, like, he's still basically going off the same sort of playbook of visuals before gameplay, I suppose. And I'm interested in seeing how that will change with episode 2, because what I played of the work in progress back before episode 1 was released was very unpromising.
What I'm interested in is what do these guys test on? Like when you think back to it designing Doom, they had more powerful machines than like what was usually available on the market. So when they ended, they had to like downgrade everything so it would be still playable on the usual machine. So, what does Term test on? To like, does he really like play on some kind of supercomputer that it runs well on that? Because I can't possibly imagine that.
I'd imagine a bunch of the issue with this, the reason that I think the real reason that they've delayed is that it didn't run well on their machines either.
Yeah, it's like you just make the map you want to make, and then you realize it doesn't run well. Oh, so what? Let's just release it anyway.
Blade of Agony was not designed for mortal computers. It was designed for theoretical quantum computers that will exist when the aliens come and dominate mankind. And
Powered
even
by
then,
CryEngine.
Well, maybe we'll revisit it in several years and realize how well it plays.
well, the train for that has already passed. I mean, we've already given it the award.
Well, yeah, the Scuba will be heralded as the next, well, as the coming that we missed.
Yes. It's been a nice amount of news in the community, actually. Got a nice amount of stuff, but from there, let's start winding down a little bit. Sort of stuff we've been working on. Which of y'all would like to take it first? Fonz? Do? Kens?
Oh, well, I mean, I'm alphabetically up the front, aren't I? Well, I've been working on this so much that I can't even pull myself away from it while we're in intermission. Look, I mean, I'm part of that, I guess, cabal of idiots on Doom World that subscribe to far more than they can handle. This is not a phenomenon that's particularly, you know, like unique to a clique or something. There are lots of people that have this issue, and if you've listened to any of the podcasts that I've conducted, or maybe even, dare I mention it here, the WXR interview I had with 40 Ounce. Oh no!
Yeah. I remember that.
Yeah,
you sounded like you were on a radio across
being
the
passed
room.
through some sort of turnip or something. You know? I mean, lots of my ramblings in that discussion was about this sort of autopilot mentality that goes on with the community and the community projects that they put out, and how it's very automated and so that everyone sort of feels that they should subscribe to things but not necessarily make content because no one will judge them for it. And I'm one of those people. So at the moment I'm currently working on about 12 to 14 and probably plus the names of something that I can't even remember, and consequently most of these things have been in development for most of them at least 2 to 3 years, some of them like TNT 2 in excess of 8. So that's what I'm working on, so to speak, without actually working on it. But WhoDunIt is an interesting one. The developers of WhoDunIt are now working on that game essentially for the Unreal Engine. And so they've left the old Doom version to the devices of myself and a couple of other enthusiasts like REKKR and DRL, who we call Wint for some reason because it's similar to Drill. And this is basically my my inauguration into the world of coding for ZDoom. So I may become more prevalent in this area and feature more on the podcasts more.
You're a man now, Alf.
Thanks, cheers. It's tough going though, because it's a mess.
Soon we will introduce you to ZScript, and then from there, you will go from a man to a hero.
Back to a boy.
And then somewhere when will be puberty. It'll be a strange period.
It'll be really confusing.
I'm scared.
That's what ZScript does to everybody. But how's WhoDunIt treating you?
Not very well. It's compiled about as well as you would imagine any project from the Skulltag era. People who had sort of unnecessary resources. All of the Skulltag resources were thrown into the PK3, of which only basically statues are used. There's redundant code coming out the woodwork, and the way things are arranged on the servers online, which means all the resources are split across about 5 or 6 different PK3s, and there's no authority as to how they'll all get managed and everything. So what we're effectively doing is stripping everything down to the base code, sort of ripping out the cancer, but in the process taking out all the organs as well, so that we're having to piece them back into the body. It's an arduous process, but we're looking forward to it because there's a lot of potential there for creating new content, new maps, that sort of thing. It's unexplored. And we're having a lot of fun just on private servers toying around with that. So hopefully, we've contacted the developers from originally, like Conflagrated and folks, so they're all cool with that. So hopefully, yeah, in due course, we'll be putting something out for other people to play and test. It'll be great.
Beauty. Looking forward to it. So how about you, Do?
Well, you know how Back to Saturn X E1 came out in March? So that was actually not true.
I'm really glad that it's a final release and nothing was wrong with it at all.
Right. So at first we really thought that we would just ignore all the issues that were propping up because really it would just fuck everything like that. And it just kept piling on. And given our mentality, we just eventually caved down. So we got back to the editors and started to editing the maps again. So we're fixing all the misaligned sprites and mistagged things on lower skills. I would like to say that none of the issues that were actually reported were, you know, part of the stuff I usually play tests. It was all like the lower skills that I don't touch. So I'm completely off the hook for this one. But yeah.
What really fascinates me though is that to me this is like an instance of receding decimal points. Like it's never going to actually be in a perfect condition. So how do you know when to pull up stumps or just say enough is enough? Because the sort of things that you're editing at the moment are so infinitesimally insignificant and small that no one would notice, you know, the difference between the thing being released now and basically 4 years ago at this point.
If you didn't want any bugs, then you should just play on UV.
Yeah, but this is what I said. This is all what I said. That we're done. We don't care about it anymore. But then it was like, oh, you know that map 6 is actually harder on the easy skill than it is on the medium skill. So that's weird. And then there are actually some new display overflows showed up. So that was like, oh shit, that's a problem.
In reachable locations.
Right, yeah, map 15. So, yeah, you should expect the final release of E1 soon. And then we finally move to E2, so hopefully E3 is still inside of 2017, maybe.
Let's be honest, this is really all just a way to avoid working on E2.
Well, E3. E2 is mostly done, so...
Has E3 even been formally announced yet?
They've been dancing around it.
It's like, I would say it's 60% done. And
it has been 60% done for...
Because y'all know I'm not censoring this out.
No, it's no problem. That's actually, we probably said that in public previously, like, and we've been getting some new maps for E3, so that shit's progressing. It's just that to focus on it, people need to stop reporting bugs for E1. So folks, please shut up.
One thing that you do have in your favor though is that like BTSX not getting a proper release has become effectively a meme at this stage, so that you don't have to worry about, you know, not putting something out in time, otherwise it might lose relevance or something. With any other project, I imagine people would, you know, you'd feel the pressure to get something else soon while it's a hot topic. But Back to Saturn X is always a hot topic, so you could go on for another 5 years at this point, and everyone would still be all the rage when you drop the thread.
Please stop reporting bugs, everyone shut up. Well, I'm looking forward to BTSX coming out for Skyrim in the near future.
Guys, you heard it here, absolutely confirmed. BTSX Episode 3 by the end of 2017, confirmed once and for all.
Oh shit. Well, I better start opening the editors. And quit my day job!
I'm comfortable stance here because Do and I both know that there's something else on the horizon that I'm not even sure we're able to talk about. Well, no. That's a joke. You didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Cancel Terminate, you have to cancel that bit out.
Sure, yeah.
This can't go live. This can't go live. Stop it!
Alright, next up. How about you, Kens?
I'm boring. I'm still working on the same thing I was working on when we recorded the very first episode.
Okay, moving on from there.
Which is MetaDoom. I'm getting close to a new release. I'm very happy with it. It's close to the what I originally envisioned the mod to be when I started it like a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently finished the Spiderdemon, which was difficult because with all the other monsters, there was a lot of art resources I could use, even as just a base.
Not so much with the Spiderdemon.
Yeah, no. I ended up looking at how other mods did it, like D4D and Brutal Doom and that, and they ended up just using the original iWAD sprites.
I mean, understandably so, because that thing's a behemoth. You can't really sprite over it easily.
Yeah, so I did some mock-ups, just with one frame to try and figure out what I'd do with it, and I was just like, oh, fuck it. So I started coding the Spider Mastermind using the original iWAD sprites, and I was very happy with it. I showed a video on the public Zandronum Discord and a couple of my mock-ups, and Dr. PieSpy, the guy who makes Doom Delta, he took those ideas and he just ran with it. Like, he made these awesome new sprites pre-rendered in Blender, and they just really fit the feel of the mod down to an absolute T, and it is fun. It just makes the whole thing so much better. It's awesome.
Yeah. If there's one thing that Dr. PieSpy knows, it's mashing Doom stuff together. I mean, in case Doom Delta didn't give enough of that away.
Yeah, he is an absolute champ about that stuff. So that was cool. And as I'm finishing things up, I'm sort of wondering, like, what do I do next? And I have a couple of ideas about that, and I don't want to say anything just yet because I'm sort of superstitious and things get cursed if I announce them too early. But I might be going back to an old project in a way, but I also might just be going on to something new.
You'll finally update Samsara again.
Caleb's coming, baby.
Actually, I think one thing we can safely guess about your next project, whatever it may be, is that A, it will have a dog in it.
Of course.
And B, it will have at least 2 jokes in it.
Almost certainly. I've actually had to really sit on my hands with MetaDoom in regards to joke stuff.
Can't have 3.
Now, what do you think he is, Valve?
And now I'll finally be able to give myself a joke stranger.
As for me, myself, the stuff I've been working on, now that I'm finished, I think I'm allowed to say this, but I was brought on board as the audio designer for REKKR.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, in charge of sound effects of all kinds. I did the monster sounds, I did the weapon sounds, I did the item sounds, I did the GUI sounds, etc., etc. For those not familiar, REKKR is a total conversion / full game being made in the engine. Sort of a fantasy, medieval, Viking-esque thing.
It's being made with like a vanilla compatibility, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yes. It aims to stick entirely to vanilla's restraints. We've been
is that familiar territory for you, Tim?
Not at all. We've been working in Chocolate Doom for the main engine of choice, and we've been using Dehacked for the code base, and that has been as unfamiliar to me as you can possibly get. It's been really cool learning all this stuff, like learning all the restraints of the original engine, the stuff it could do, the stuff it couldn't do, and how too many actors on a map actually kind of kills it dead, especially if they're all in view at once. In terms of sound design, one of the things Reve really wanted for REKKR was for the style to be reminiscent of old-fashioned 90s FPSs. And
that means stock sound effects.
Yeah, lots of stock sound effects. The biggest thing for me to do was stick with 4 tenets. 1, they must all sound distinct from each other, obviously. 2, sounds must be either original or from a stock library. 3, low quality and mono. And 4, no heavy editing with modern techniques. It was tough. It was extremely tough. I signed on like a little under a year ago, I think? And it was extremely tough to do sound effects with those restrictions. In classic FPS style, the main audio library I chose was the General Series 6000, which was the main library of choice for Doom and Heretic, and a lot of the editing that I used entailed just mixing the sounds together, stacking them on top of each other, speeding them up, slowing them down, changing pitch, adding on a couple filters, and all sorts of different ways to try and make them sound new or different. Biggest trouble, though, was ensuring everything is still legible at low quality, because 11,025 kilohertz does not allow for a lot of information to slide through. It crunches up everything real tiny.
Yeah, it's trying to recapture that old feel to the sound is a really difficult challenge.
It's especially troublesome for the enemies. One of them is, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's basically a walking tree. So I tried to use a lot of tree sounds for that, like wood creaking, timber groaning, wood snapping. I took hammers to a couple of planks I had around the house, etc.
Awesome.
But a lot of the nuances of the sound just come through in stereo at a high kilohertz. So when you crunch it down, more often than not, what you get is basically static. you just go...
I'm sure that static will sound perfectly legible to everyone. Yeah, all the purists.
Yeah.
I think you've just spent too long in your little bubble world there. It's perfectly fine. I can hear it. All the wood coming through that static.
Yeah, this
Great.
is completely legit for the target audience.
Well, joke's on you guys, because that didn't involve any wood at all.
Oh no! Oh boy! Touch wood.
Yeah. Even with all of the troubles, though, I mean, it's extremely fun to do. I had a lot of fun working with the project. And now that I'm officially done with my stuff, I'm really happy to see what will come next. I mean, REKKR's been coming along slowly but steadily, and we've had a whole ton of folks just kind of popping out of the woodwork to pour stuff into it. We had a entire soundtrack contributed entirely by a person who wishes to stay anonymous. He only just calls himself Hexenmapper. And that is really, really cool.
Hexenmapper. There's a fucking scarlet letter.
That limits it to just one person on Earth. So good luck staying anonymous.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm the only person who knows how to spread one switch across 16 maps. AMA.
So I'd be really interested to hear how you came about getting this position, I guess, because it's unusual. It's less unusual these days that you could get like a dedicated individual for sound or music. I think I was the Doomold's first music director for Mutiny, which is a very strange position. I was just contacted to arrange the music and do nothing else, which doesn't sound like something that would happen in the 1990s or whatever. But so how did you come into that position? You don't remember?
Well, no, it's more I was shitposting on 4chan, he was shitposting on 4chan, we met each other. He said, hey, I'm making a thing, do you want to do sounds? I said, sure.
Oh,
9 months later, a shitposting baby was born.
When a mommy and a daddy shitpost on anonymous image boards very lovingly. Yeah, actually, that's not entirely true. I have come into contact with the author, Reve, before. We kind of tend to keep bumping into each other, because I tend to make stuff that has a lot of art holes, and he is a genuinely amazing artist, so he tends to make a lot of stuff that needs programming holes. Like, for example, his current avatar on Doom World is actually the drones for push. He released them as a sort of update to a WAD that his father made when he was young. He made all of the sprites and
Wait, what? His father?
A sort of update to an enemy of a WAD that his father was making. And it's a modern take on a unique and custom enemy. And he posted the entire sheet on 4chan for people to just use as they want. And I went, oh, sure, I can make use of that. And I slotted them in push. And
I still can't get over the part where his father was making something in the 90s and now he's revisiting it 20 years later.
Yeah, that's actually really, really cool. I really liked it.
Damn!
I mean,
that's awesome.
This sprite was handed down from my father to my father's father. I kept it hidden up my ass through Vietnam. And now, my son, I hand this sprite to you.
And then I shitpost on 4chan.
Well, we're gonna look at it. I mean, this Doom's what? It's 23 years old now. We're getting to that sort of generational phase. We're gonna start seeing the kidnappers come through. It's gonna be weird. It's
Actually,
gonna be great.
That sounds like an idea for a community project. Like parents make base
Father,
layouts.
son,
Yeah, and then they wait like 20
Oh,
years
no.
for their sons to grow up, and the
Oh,
sons have to
no.
detail them.
What
God
happened
damn.
here?
Anyway, we bumped into each other, and he mentioned, kind of offhandedly when we were comparing notes about a project at the time, I think I was working on Metroid Dreadnought at the time, but he was mentioning that he had in mind an idea for sort of total conversion / full game. He wanted to take Hexens and Heretics sort of medieval fantasy art style, but make it brighter and clearer. He wanted to make it something that's really fun to play. And he wanted to make a sort of authentic take on it. He wanted something that really felt like it came out of the 90s. But he had no clue where it would start in regards to sound assets. I mean, he said, I could do the art really easily, but I have no clue where to begin when it comes to making sounds. And I said, I could do the sounds. I mean, I've got a project I'm working on, and I need the experience. I want to be able to know what creating sounds for a full and complete game would entail. And he said, yeah, sure, alright, show me what you got. So I created a couple sounds for a couple monsters, sent them on over to him, and he was like, okay, yeah, you got it. Do me the rest of the sounds. Here's an entire list of every single sound I am using, along with what it will be for. Here, have fun. And then from there I was like, wow, what the hell did I get into? Actually, I kid. It was pretty fun. But now I'm finally done, and it's like, wow.
Well, shit, you kept that hidden from us. I didn't even know you were working on it.
Yeah. REKKR's kind of...
So wait, you're like completely done with that. So you've already fulfilled your part. So it's so complete, so nearing the completion that you won't even have to revisit any part of your work.
Yep, 100% completely done. I submitted every single sound. He went over every single sound. He made tweaks and changes and requests. He made me do a couple additional enemies. I submitted them all in. And a year later, I'm done. Completely done.
So we're nearing 1.0. You're saying...
In sounds, yeah. In terms of maps, he's got several maps that he needs to fill in, so I don't know.
And now you can finally return to your true passion. Booty.
Booty, I'm still trying to learn how to Z-script, because ever since Z-script came out, decorate has been deprecated. And I know deprecated does not mean removed, but if I want to go forward with this, I need to get in on a language that allows me to make use of advanced features in order to simplify things. So I have been converting the entirety of Booty to Z-script bit by bit, and by God is it slow and painful.
Are you going to be the person in charge of writing the documentation for Z-script?
That requires someone who is an incompetent idiot.
Yeah, but you're the first one who will ever do anything with Z-script.
No, that means I'm out. I'm the biggest incompetent idiot.
That makes you perfectly qualified.
Oh, please, I'm nowhere near as handsome and as interesting and as powerful as the other Z-script document maintainers.
Don't worry, we're just letting the other Z-script document maintainers say their piece.
Alright, enough about what I've been working on. Boy, that went longer than I expected. Sorry about that. Stuff we've been playing recently. Fonz, dude, Kinsie, which one of you do want to go first?
WhoDunIt? Stabbing? WhoDunIt?
Are you still playing WhoDunIt?
Italian steel. It never ends. Okay. Yeah, mostly that, to be honest. Also, of course, Marquette, who I seem to be collaborating a lot with these days. Just getting to the tail end of Mayhem 2016 in April. Finishing that up.
2017?
Yeah, I just keep telling him to, you know, just if you're going to call it Mayhem, just release it next May. No one will know the difference, and it makes sense. But no, it's supposed to be a 1 monthly thing. Anyway, so he's currently working on putting the resources together for Mayhem 2017, which is Super Mario textures and the like. Which I'm astonished that's never been attempted before in Doom, or if it has. We've done Commander Keen, of course, for Doom 2 the way it did. That was fun. So I've been playing a lot of the maps that the folks are now starting to put out because it's coming towards the end of the month, and it's just amazing how just a brand new resource pack can really inspire people to take a different approach to their level design and stuff. And of course, if it's coming from the idea of Super Mario, then you know, lots of platforming in Doom, which is not a good thing, but a lot of other ideas that have been adopted that are really interesting. So I've been having a lot of fun playing this maps.
Oh, come on! First-person platforming. When has that ever gone wrong? Especially in the Doom engine. I mean, y'all love DTST, right? Angry keyboard noises.
He's like, no response, I'll have to go deeper. DTST, surely now.
How about you, Duke?
Jumping from boob to boob.
The sad thing is, I know exactly what map you're talking about.
I kind of got more involved with the KEK Awards last year because just started butting into the main categories, so I decided to be on top of things this year, and I've been playing everything that's come out. So
everything, huh?
No, come on. But I've been playing a lot of things. Just right now, I've come off some sort of Russian mapping binge. I've been replaying Shadow Man's maps and Big Menka's maps. I've also been playing Benjogami's maps. I've been pretty busy lately, actually. So yeah, ask me about recent stuff you want to know about. I can't even tell you about one specific map.
So what sort of stuff has been going on in the Russian community recently? Because I guess we wouldn't really know a whole lot about that due to the whole language gap thing, which I suppose is bridged to some extent, but it's sort of weird how things are sort of spread out around the world Doom-wise. These little mini communities with their own little niches.
Well, we had this like we observed this trend in Russian mapping that they prefer to do like realistic structures, like you have all these mansions and they do intricate sector detail and everything. And when I mentioned that into the KEK Award article for Leno's latest map, I went to their forum and they were actually discussing like, is this actually true? Like, are we really like so special about this? Like, are we really focusing on so much on the detail? Like, they didn't even know they were doing it. So that kind of surprised me. Like, they're not self-aware of the stuff they're necessarily doing. Like, they have this national trend to their mapping and they're not aware of it. I found that the most amazing thing.
It's interesting to sort of see how things it's sort of a cultural thing, I suppose, then.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder if that sort of thing is like also apparent in like Poland or other post-Soviet countries. Like a weird national trend towards contemporary architecture in Doom.
You need a big enough community. Like, if it's just one or two people in the entire nation doing that, then they probably won't have enough pull, like, to influence anyone. But with the Russians, they play each other's maps and they copy from each other. Like, they influence each other. And they have this really special style to their mapping. And it continues on. Like, definitely all their maps, they're still having that.
It's sort of interesting with these little, I suppose little isn't the right word, but with all these like international offshoot communities, it's interesting to see how these smaller user bases sort of influence and blend into each other.
Yeah.
Like with JPCP, that was a very small sub-community in Japan, and you could really see how each mapper was sort of influencing and helping out and sort of creating this interesting sort of style.
And even like you could see even with the Japanese mappers, like they don't come out from the vacuum actually, because for example Tatsard, he was the one veteran mapper in the group, so he was the one most influenced by the Western mapping, you could say, because he participated on some on PRCP, so he had like experience with Plutonia style mapping, and he's a established speedrunner. Then you had people who were obviously influenced by Rubik's, and like you could see the influences, but they still made it their own style, and it meshed together very nicely.
It's also important to point out that Tatsard, he didn't just have Plutonia style mapping under his belt, he also did heretic style mapping.
Oh shit, I didn't even know he did heretic mapping.
Actually, Tatsard, he's kind of contributed to a lot of community packs. He's done the Heretic Treasure Chest, he's done Plutonia Revisited, he's done the 1994 tune-up, he's done, obviously, JPCP, and there is another, the name escapes me at the moment, but he's a veteran, and even with him taking the reins and leading the project, a lot of JPCP was entirely isolated. And it's really interesting to see that in non-English speaking communities, because the English Doom player base, they've got all of these sort of rules for how a map should be, how it should play, what makes a map fun.
Well, all of the individuals outside the community tend to gravitate towards those I guess you could call them the Western hubs and Doom World and the like, and so that's how that sort of culture possibly eventuates. But the folks over at the Russian Doom community, for example, they're very happy just to release the stuff internally and just to appreciate it between each other. It often requires someone like Do to go hunt them down and then pull them out of obscurity, and then they'll be released to id games and stuff, but there won't be a big hoopla about it on Doom World unless someone else points it out, which is a testament to sort of their attitude towards mapping and just they're doing it for its own sake and appreciating each other's work without getting caught up in the. I don't know. I just find that very interesting, but it also makes it very difficult when you're judging the CAC awards. You need to go physically looking for this stuff, and it takes up a lot of your time.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we would love it to be, id games is not the end-all be-all for mod uploads. For one, good luck finding a gameplay mod there, and for two, it's really kind of English-focused. I mean, I had to walk one of the mappers for JPCP through. He wanted to upload his own individual mod to the id game archives, and I had to walk him through step by step. And even then, I had to contact the admins directly and let them know, okay, there's this guy, doesn't speak English very well, he's going to try uploading to your site. I'm just going to pass this along to you guys, so if it gets uploaded, you can credit him.
Yeah, but that's mostly because it's old ass obscure FTP shit.
Yeah. Who the hell uses FTP nowadays?
We say on a podcast about modding a 20-plus-year-old video game.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a I don't want to say necessary evil, but it's a hurdle that kind of comes with the territory.
Well, it contributes to the universal accessibility. Like, a lot of people don't realize that Doom World and the id archive aren't the same. That Doom World just acts as a front end to the archive.
It's a front. I knew it.
Right? Yeah, it's a conspiracy. But yeah, it's just the front end. So when you actually go to upload anything to the archive, you have to use the actual front end, which is direct FTP. So there you go. That's why the header tells you to not bitch at Doom World admins. That's independent.
Bloodshedder, why is my file not loaded?
Oh, but right now they actually do confirm that, because after Ty passed, they became Bloodshedder and TGH became the admins of It Games, so they actually do confirm those words. So actually, yeah, they're one and the same right now. It's a conspiracy. It's all true.
Those damn Doom World purists.
It Games, the Bilderbergs.
Just again mentioning what Term was talking about when he was sort of noting the differences in culture between, for example, Doom World and the Russian Doom community, and in particular, when new people come in to the community and they're confronted by these rules, I think when you have that huge influx of new people, sort of asking how they're supposed to map, that's what sort of makes people want to create a sort of model that they can work off of. I'm not sure that's necessarily the case, but I do feel that's a big contributing factor, particularly these days. Yeah. Because Doom continues to gather steam like that. Whereas in some other Russian Doom community, if someone new comes into the community, it's because they've been referenced from. That's just a guess as well. But everyone knows each other well enough that there isn't that sort of blueprint, I suppose. It needs to be written up so that you can just throw it into the myhouse.wad. My first one, whatever it is, so they know what to do.
Yeah,
it's a place where everybody knows your name, Ski.
At least they know Dude's name.
Well, there's also the French community, which is also kind of like a recluse from the mainstream.
Yeah, they do some good stuff as well.
I will admit I know nothing about the French Doom community aside from Trois Horreurs d'Agony. I horribly mispronounced that.
Their stuff. That's like they're doing this challenge stuff. That's like their topic. Like the Russians do realistic architecture. French do the challenge maps that kill you in 3 seconds.
And the Japanese do remakes of Payday maps.
And also map art.
Yes, map art. I love map art. How about you, Kinsie? What have you been playing recently? I hear you've got opinions to tell.
So, someone suggested that I give a gameplay mod called Flakes Doom a shot, since it was sort of a similar concept to my mod, in that it sort of mixed and matched different pieces from different Doom games together. So I gave it a shot, and it is fairly similar conceptually, but it does some things fairly differently. Like, for example, with the pistol, it has the standard bullet attack for the primary fire, but the alternate fire is the charge shot from Doom 2014, which uses plasma. That sort of interesting mix and match of mechanics and that it creates an interesting effect. I sort of like it, but it's got a few issues in my opinion.
Yeah?
First thing that comes to mind is a visual inconsistency. Like, the enemies and weapons on the HUD are all sprites, right?
Mm-hmm.
But all the pickups in the world are either voxels or ripped models from Quake 2.
What?
Yeah, and it just sort of creates this weird inconsistency where you have like sprite-based zombie men towing through a field of like a voxel medkits and the armor model from Quake 2. And that just doesn't really work out all that well. It just feels like someone figured out, hey, there's model and voxel support in the engine, let's add it. I mean, if it was just all models or all voxels for the items, I could dig that, since like Blood and Shadow Warrior used voxels for items, so it's sort of consistent. But sort of mixing the two together, it just doesn't really work out.
Yeah.
Second thing is weapon selecting. Like, the weapon priority when you press a number key, and the order when you're mouse wheeling through weapons is kind of weird and sort of painful. Like, if you have a rocket launcher and hand grenades, pressing 5 will prioritize the hand grenades over the rocket launcher in my experience. And that can be a bit of a killer in fights.
Yeah.
Speaking of the grenades, they're a separate weapon instead of being like an offhand inventory item thing or a keybind thing. And I don't really like that, because create means you sort of have to fumble around your weapons when you need to quickly throw a grenade at a horde of incoming enemies. It's just that's just more of a design preference on my kind. But I think the biggest sin that the mod commits, and this is a pretty big one in my opinion actually, is that weapons don't auto-switch when you run out of ammo. When you try to fire without any bullets, just pops up a message saying, no rockets or whatever. And that means you suddenly go, oh shit, and you have to fumble for the number keys or the mouse, go through the mouse wheel stuff, usually while there's a horde of pinkies tearing off your face.
Is that a problem for weapons that reload?
There's no like reload mechanic outside of the super shotgun. So
can we pay for a designated code consultant who just patrols the forums and I would happily cough up some dosh for him to just make sure that we never have to have these sort of discussions.
Like someone who just wanders around for rolled up newspaper and just wanders around, and when they see something like this, they just whack you on the wrist and go, no. No.
Well, basically, he can be like the code version of the ideas guy. He can just poke his head around the office door and say, "Hey, your code's broken," and then give you a card. Say, "Contact this guy. He'll sort it out for you."
Yeah, but what would his charge be? Like, you can pay him with sodaholic money.
Well,
like,
the thing is, hitting people legally without repercussions is its own reward.
So while I was testing it, I needed like a map set to test it on. So I gave it a run using a slightly outdated, admittedly beta of TNT Revolution.
Ooh.
I believe the final version of that is actually out like today or in a few hours or something, if you're looking to date this recording.
Probably is actually. That's some, yeah.
So it's a map pack for Doom 2, weirdly enough, inspired by TNT from Final Doom. And going back to that discussion of rules earlier, I know there are people that take fan sequels to the Final Doom episodes very, very seriously. Like, there's a lot of discussion of the Plutonia style. Actually, it's very Plutonia focused, I suppose, which shows just how influential that map set was. And I'm not necessarily knowledgeable enough about those expansions to be one of them, like down to the deep mechanics of how Plutonia places monsters and designs encounters and that. All I know is it just kills me a bunch. And all I can really be sure of about Revolution is that playing through the first few maps, I enjoyed the encounter design.
Yeah,
and I think the gameplay mod I was playing with actually helped out in that regard in some cases. Like, the first level, there is a Berserk pack right at the start, just like in TNT. But Flakes Doom replaces that with a quad damage, like in Quake. So you sort of get this. You basically go into John Wick mode for a little while, just popping monsters with the pistol, and that created a fun and interesting mechanic.
Pop, 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 watching zombies drop.
So yeah, that was an interesting bit of exploration. You mentioned that there's another TNT project going on. How's that going on?
That's
well, I mean, it's been destroyed, reconstructed, pieced together again. We have several Frankensteins working on the project.
Going on 3 years, 7 years, isn't it?
Yeah, 8 at this stage, I think.
8 years.
Look, I mean, I don't want to go into discussion about it too much because I feel I might blow some sort of gasket internally. I mean, it's taking a lot just to keep this calm resolve right now. TNT 2, god damn it! Why can't I just...
No, the thing is, because we mentioned the other... Those were one project originally. That was like a fork. That was like a...
Yeah.
The browning is the official term that you're speaking of. He's speaking, of course, of the debacle. For anyone who's not aware, we won't go into too much detail because once we start, we can't stop. It's the Pringles of Doom. There was an internal conflict in which management went missing, and an individual who everyone will know of, but we won't name him just for legal reasons. It took over the project, and the playtesters that were affiliated with him were effectively yes men. Geez, now we really are getting controversial. But they won't be listening to this. That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, is there anyone else that you want to shit talk behind their back?
Hey, I haven't done enough today, okay? I have to get in the action somehow.
Oh, yes, man. Okay. Yeah, I guess.
Well, yeah,
we're really just getting into it now. And the testers, well, they were effectively twats.
Is this healthy for you? Are you venting?
I mean, to be absolutely fair, no, because there were only two of them, and they simply liked his work, whereas everyone else, when they eventually snapped to and realized, and actually played the stuff that was being put out over that sort of 18-month period, they didn't like it. So it's very easy to shit on them, but the reality is that they probably just have different tastes. That's me trying to dig myself out of a hole. Really rubbish. The level design was terrible. Anyway, so that's what the split eventuated. He decided he would head off and make Revolution, which ironically has come to fruition a lot sooner. And he's been kicked off that project as well. So it's actually a tragedy. He's been kicked off too. We should laugh. It is a piece of comedy.
You are relishing this, aren't you?
Somebody get a towel.
That's probably the last great thing on the buckle. I mean, there's been radio silence on the drummer front for about 3 years since then. If you want to sort of delve into that territory, then you have to go back to the Browning episode and the old TNT2 thread, or go to Little Temple. I mean, those are really the only.
Oh, Little Temple. Haven't seen.
Who said a Little Temple? I didn't. Oh boy, gee.
Little Temple. I haven't seen him ever since that 7-year-old French girl started making maps with her group.
Him, you say? That's an interesting choice of pronoun.
I remember this. I wish I didn't, but I remember it. But you mentioned the browning. I noticed that the maps that I played of this map of Revolution were actually, pretty quakey. Is that part of where sort of the tension started?
Well, that's a holdover from when the individual in question. His name's for God's sake. I mean, I don't know why I keep dancing around it.
Get the blades turn.
Thought that it would look sort of a lot better if it was dressed in a nice sort of shade of burgundy.
By the way, it's entirely Alfonzo shit-talking you. I have nothing to do with this.
You're endorsing it. This is your podcast. Yeah,
no,
you can
not
step
at
in
all.
at any moment, but you're letting that shit roll.
Hey, I already called you out for shit-talking. Now, please continue.
Well, there's nothing more to be said. I am enjoying this. You're right. I could stop at any moment. I just keep going.
I'm not an addict. I could quit any time I want.
But hey, brown is one of my favorite colors. Like I did a new stuff article once, just basically discussing the color in depth instead of discussing the level design of one of Tolwan's. I love brown. And apparently the people of TNT
that
Revolution
explains your taste.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shit, dude.
I'm sorry, that was rude. That was really rude. I'm sorry.
I deserved it though. Anyway. He's a champion individual.
Or maybe
he has made some good stuff.
The thing I'm wondering, if both of the TNT projects come out in the same year,
the Mordeth goes to the TNT battle at launch.
Who gets the Mordeth award?
It has to be both. It's a joint effort. We can have two cacos,
One of them has it during the weekday, the other one has it during the weekends.
But can you imagine?
Joint custody.
That moment when you're on the stage and you're shaking hands. Yes, we did it together.
Oh yeah, no, that'll be the coup de grace at the very end there. That'll be the the curtain raises and we all bow to the audience. It'll be a wonderful moment.
We're both winners. We made this together.
Interesting thing about
both these
guys
shit
shaking
projects.
hands, and one guy's like, "Thank you, good job, well done," and the other guy's like, "I pissed on my hand."
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank you for your hard work. Also, I fucking hate you.
Yeah.
this all happened about 3
You're
years
only
ago.
here because of me, you know.
Since that time, a couple of people have recommended, the bad blood has since seeped away. The leeches have done their job. Maybe we should just merge them back together again. And there was a point where I was wondering, because both projects were in strife, they weren't getting done for the longest time. And, it was over. Why not just merge them back together again and bloody get on with it? But, hey, we now have 2 megawatts to come out of it. I've played the beta of Revolution, and it's hot stuff. Not as good as TNT 2, I can say that, certified. But, you should give it a fair crack anyway.
Sounds good.
Jeez, that really hit a nerve.
Playing the violin of grievances on Intermission.
Let's move on to something a little bit more positive, shall we? Something I've been playing recently. It is a total conversion / full game being made in the engine by someone named Zan, and it is not for Zandronum. So there's the pun lost right there.
Shit.
It is called Head-On. Head-On. I think it's Head-On. I don't know. It's called, I'll just be referring to it as Head-On because I'm assuming it's short for Hedonist. But it's called Head-On. It's kind of a sort of D&D fantasy world with guns thing, where you play as a sort of half-orc, half-demon, half-dressed F-List OC. And she wakes up nearly dead, and that's it. I mean, kind of a non-story without any introduction. I mean, I have no clue what's going on or what the place is. But you wake up in an underground cavern, and you have to wander around in order to get out. And I have no clue what's going on, but I guess that's kind of the point. It still leaves me feeling slightly lost. But that being said, first impressions about it are great. It is extremely pretty. There is a really talented artist on board the project. The areas look neat, the UI looks neat, the character looks neat, the title screen is amazing, custom graphics, custom items, custom enemies. It's got the whole shebang.
So where does the other foot drop to?
Right, yeah.
Whenever you start talking things up like this, it's usually while you're taking a deep breath to utter enormous, but...
Kinsie, please. I'm a happy guy.
No, it sounds too positive.
I'm the happy guy. I'm the optimist guy. Anyway, first area, you're thrown into an underground cavern. I mean, you're at low health for some reason. Again, not explained. Areas are cramped, it's empty and quiet, but it's got that sort of Unreal style opening where your shit has very clearly happened, but you don't know what. And the atmosphere is top notch. The map is dark and dreary and cramped, and it's got the sort of droning Sun O style guitar. How do you pronounce that name anyway? Sun O parenthesis.
I don't know, it's just Sun.
Yeah, Sun.
As far as I know.
You got that sort of droning Sun style guitar, and it is...
I think it's pronounced with the sound of a bong rip.
Sun. And then you go for 20 minutes. And
as mentioned before, there's lots of custom sprite work and texture work, and everything looks really, really pretty. Like, the cave tops has water dripping down. There's little glow bugs floating around. It's beautiful. The enemies are really creepy. I mean, the first set you encounter are like these sort of shirtless, cultless guys. They're super scrawny with like their ribs poking out. They've got black holes where their eyes would be. And when they die, they fling out their weapon, spinning thuds into the ground. There's blood splattering everywhere. It's awesome. It's really, really cool. As is the norm lately, given all of the retro-style indie FPSs lately, it says that the gameplay is inspired by old-school FPSs. This one takes particularly from the build bunch, like Blood, Shadow Warrior, Duke Nukem 3D, and it actually feels like it. The levels... Well, there's only one level in the demo, but it's large and it's roomy. I actually had to consult my map to figure out where I was going and where I needed to go. I had to look at my map! Guys!
What's a map?
I had to look at my map. I didn't know where I was going. That's cool. That's really cool. There's also some cute interactive tidbits, like one puzzle that keeps popping up is like a switch is depowered, so you have to go get a power core in order to slot into the switch and make it powered up, so then you can press it, which is basically the same as finding keys and key cards, but it's different just enough that I really, really like it. Killing dudes also pretty satisfying as well. Like, there's only 2 weapons so far, just one gun and an axe, but the spike gun, it spits out at a decent rate, and hitting enemies with it, again, spews out a lot of blood. It's also got the ability to aim down sights for some reason. Never used that. Never used
it's
that.
It's literally strafe now. 0 out of 10. Gives you hope.
Yeah, finally we're getting to the questionable stuff. Like we were, you know, you were hyping it up so much that we were just waiting.
Yeah, the moment I mention aim down sights, it's like, oh, there it goes.
Yes, 0 out of 10.
Yeah. The actual weapon sprites themselves, I mean, like, the axe is kind of blurry. The first weapon you pick up, again, it's an axe, and it looks really weird swinging it because there's a sort of motion blur on all of the sprites, and it looks really unnatural in motion. Also, the HUD is huge for some reason. Can't shrink it down with normal options, so you got to do this sort of overall user interface scale, otherwise it increases your entire screen. It's extremely, extremely early work in progress. I'm not gonna lie, I crashed straight out a couple times, several times. Every single weapon, the select and deselect state has a 0-tick infinite loop. I had to manually go into the file and edit those out, but that's a promising sign of quality. I also ended up doing some sequence breaks entirely by accident that I'm pretty sure broke the game. Yeah, me doing sequence breaks? What are the odds of that?
Get out of town.
But it seems really, really promising so far. And if there's one thing this shows, it's that you don't need to be a super good developer or a programmer in order to make something fun. Like, this guy is an artist through and through. I mean, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Everything looks pretty, pretty, pretty. It's gorgeous. The map is beautiful. The sprites are wonderful. And he has very little programming experience, but it's still fun to play through. I had a lot of fun going through the map. I had a lot of fun fighting the enemies. Even if it's this early on, I liked it a lot. There are...
What did you say the first enemy you encounter is?
Cultist.
Okay. If it's not a cloud of flies, or smoke, or a hanging torso,
frogs,
or a Doom 3 Wraith, then I'm not interested, okay? It's Tormentor's Refinery, I'll go home.
Yeah.
No, but I definitely agree that a dedicated artist that's talented enough and has a vision can definitely make a project work, even though he doesn't have all the intricacies of the engine down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Skillsaw, he has this knack for design, fluid quality. Like, he knows what he's doing, but he's completely oblivious to the map breaks. The map, like the shit that breaks the maps. I just have to all the time. I have to point him out that he just mapped in a completely easy sequence break that makes it effortless to exit the map instantly. So, like, it's not an inherent skill that you have to be completely perfect at all the intricacies of the Doom engine. Mm-hmm. You just have to be a pretty good artist, and you just work on that, and it just goes out all natural.
Yeah.
To be fair, Skillsaw is basically a unicorn at this point.
Yeah.
Something that just...
There is one thing that was said on another forum. I think it was something awful. One guy was saying, if you want to make a game, don't expect me to be interested unless you can at least match the quality of Back to Saturn X, and I was like, setting the bar a little high there, aren't you, mate? For me, all it boils down to is it fun to play through? And yes, this was fun to play through. It was fun to shoot enemies. It was fun to navigate through the map. It was even fun opening up the file and editing out the crashes.
Yeah, a real fixer-upper.
Yeah, it is a fixer-upper.
That's the point that I was trying to make. That like this person is taking the pieces he sees and tries to assemble them in a fun way. And just because they break in ways he's not experienced in doesn't mean it's bad, because the fun is in it and he just needs to learn how to avoid the issues. So I'm completely fine with that approach.
There are like two big issues. I know Kinsie, he's waiting for the other foot to drop, so here I go. There's two things to criticize. Is that one, I mentioned before that there's a little interactive set pieces where you have to slot thing A into thing B, and it's not entirely clear what you're supposed to get. The items really blend into the environment. The glowing power core crystals for the aforementioned switches, the armor is supposed to be some sort of crystal magic that powers up a protective amulet that you wear, and guess what it looks like?
I'm really hoping you're trying to say that we're getting pixel hunting from point-and-click adventures in FPS.
Actually, yeah.
Because, oh my god, I'm so hard right now.
Actually, yeah, later on in the level, you have to pick up a flower in order to complete a ritual, but the flower is in a forest surrounded by other decorative flowers. So it's like, what flower am I supposed to get?
Yes, and then you have to use it on every other flower, please.
No, you just have to put it in a shrine. There's also, I joked before that the character's design would look appropriate on F-List, and another thing is the half-naked dead goblin women kind of creeped me out. I mean, it's pretty clear that the character designs were all influenced by the dude's tastes, and yeah, that's fine and all. Sex and sexuality is a pretty normal part of artistic expression, but when I see a scene of everyone dead and I'm seeing them all splayed out and bloody with their boobs out, and it's like,
blood and boobs.
Buddy, you got something you want to tell us, buddy? You okay over there? You okay? I mean,
has someone seen Mike?
I'm not the kind of guy that gets all squeamish about boobies and cooties and video games, but I'm thinking you maybe want to keep the sex and the death separate.
The Shadow Man territory with...
Oh boy. Did someone
say
drama again? Am I invited back to the conversation? Yes, pussy, right.
Yeah, but aside from that, I really, really like Tenon. I mean, it is super early in development, but I had a lot of fun playing with it. I'm really excited to see what the dude does next with it, and hopefully the entire rest of the game is like that one single level, with less crashes, and a little bit more obvious items, and less boobs.
Wow, you just hyped me up.
I like this sort of stuff. I really like stuff that just pushes this engine to the limits and does different stuff. I mean, I could overlook all the flaws as long as it does something different and fun. I mean, Black Warrior is still one of my favorite gameplay mods, and it's clunky as hell, but I love it. I love every single bit of it. It's just, yeah!
Honestly, when I look at Black Warrior, I'm like, oh god, this. I understand how you like it. but I think you like it because you look down into the technicalities of it. Like, oh, this is so impressive from the programming point, or from the if you arrange it into a video, but it's just completely useless for playing.
Yeah.
To be.
Yeah, it's not enormously fun for playing, but for looking at from a distance and getting slightly nervous.
There's none of that for this. I mean, the programming is amateur as hell. I mean, amateur
I was
for
gonna
like.
say butt. Programming is butt.
Yeah, but it still manages to put things together, and it is fun to go through. And I'm really interested in seeing where it goes next. And hopefully other folks can check it out and give their feedback as well. Because Lord knows something like this could go south very, very quickly.
Yeah, you said that like there's a few things that probably should be dropped or reduced in later levels. But like there might be a good base there, but it's one of those things where it could go good or bad. It seems like it's just sitting on the precipice. And that's that makes it one of the more interesting projects because you're sort of interested in seeing which way it goes. Which foot drops first.
Mm-hmm. But I'm excited.
Right, yeah, it's sitting on the fence of going the right way or the tormentor way.
And whatever way it goes, it's gonna be fun to watch.
Whatever way it goes, at least it won't have 14,000 actors in one night.
Oh boy. He's become the most reliable crutch that this podcast has ever known.
I don't know about that. We still have Sergeant Mark.
Whoa!
Oh, yeah. Well, you do need two of those things to walk, you know.
Actually, I'm trying to put a moratorium on Brutal Doom jokes, so yeah.
Did we mention Grabs Out this entire episode? Come on.
Okay, should I just shut this down right now before we get out of context with the references?
I'm sorry.
I forgive you.
I don't know. You really shouldn't. I don't know. I shouldn't be invited back on after that. No, it was a bad call. I assumed I could multitask. I was told that only women can do that. I should have heeded the advice.
Whoa, okay. Goodbye, everybody.
Are we still live? Are we?